Today I'm going to show you how to make this lovely food store, or meat safe as they used to be called. And this is the sort of piece that would look at home in a more traditional style doll's house, or something more contemporary like a farmhouse kitchen or a sort of rustic style kitchen. There's lots of room inside for display, so you can have a lot of fun filling these up as well. I've put the cutting list down in the description below, and coming up next is a list of the tools and materials you'll need to complete it, and then we'll get started. For this project you'll need a suitable craftwood such as basswood or rubbesh, both of which are available in my Etsy shop, and there's a link to the shop below. You'll need a craft knife. I use this Swan Morton knife which takes a size 10A blade, a steel rule, obviously for measuring and for cutting the wood along with the knife, a nice sharp pencil, an eraser, a wood glue or PVA, super glue, cocktail sticks for applying glue and removing excess glue from along the joins, mini clamps for securing drying parts, masking tape and scissors for the same. You'll need some normal dressmaking pins, a mini drill, a 0.75mm bit and a 1.5mm bit to go in those, a pair of pliers, some wooden doorknobs, a couple of grades of sandpaper, paint, optional wood dye if you want to do the top a different colour, and mesh for the doors. We're going to begin by drawing a pencil line across the centre of each side piece. So turn the piece, make a little pencil mark in the centre there, and at the other side as well, and then join those up. And as you do so, just continue the line onto the edge of each piece. And that will just help when we're positioning the mouldings. The same on the other side. Then we're going to attach a moulding at the top and bottom of each piece, and then sit in centrally across that line we've just made. So I've dispensed some glue here onto a piece of cereal packet card. I'm using a cocktail stick to apply it, and I'm going to be using just normal clothes pegs or clothespins to attach the mouldings to the pieces, so have those handy before you start gluing. So apply glue to the back of the first moulding. Position that across the top so that the top of each piece is flush, and you can just feel that with your finger. Press that down. Next one across the bottom, again making sure that it's flush along that bottom edge. And then the central moulding. And mouldings are good because not only do they sort of add a bit of detail to the piece, but when you're using sort of long pieces of wood like this, so you're making a larger piece of furniture, they act as a support as well. They just strengthen the piece. So use that little pencil line just to make sure that that's sitting in the centre of that moulding, and just do that by eye. Use a spare cocktail stick just to remove any glue from along the joins. You just hold the moulding into place as you do that so you don't knock it out of place, and then you can bring in your clothes pegs And it's important to do this because when wood is drying it tends to curl upwards if it isn't secured. And then just pop that to one side to dry and do the remaining piece. We're now going to do exactly the same thing with the back piece. So draw your pencil line across the centre. And that piece can also be put to one side to dry. Once you've allowed enough time for the glue to dry, remove the pegs and then just sand along the edge of each piece just to make sure we've got nice flush edges. So hold the piece against the sandpaper on your worktop and just go along in one direction. Don't rock the piece back and forth as you'll round off the corners. I've actually already done all of these pieces, and you can check that they're flush just by lining them up with the legs, and you shouldn't have any gaps and there should be a nice flush fit. So do that with each piece, the back piece as well, and then you can pop the back piece to one side and we're going to glue a leg along each side of each side piece. So apply glue to both sides of the side piece. Pop it back down on your worktop and then press a leg to either side so that the top of each piece is flush. You want a nice straight line along that top edge. And you can use a spare piece of 5x5 strip just to check that you have got a straight edge along there. So if you push everything up to it, and then squeeze everything together. While you're sort of holding on to it, you can use another cocktail stick to remove the excess glue. Give it a good press together. And rather than trying to pick that piece up, just very gently slide it along your work surface. And that piece can be left to dry. And then you can do the same with the remaining side piece. So we're now going to draw lines across the back and side pieces. We'll begin with the back piece. So on the unmoulded side, and from what will become the top edge, make the first pencil mark 44.5mm from the top and 86.5 from the top, and in inches that is 1 3/4 inches and 3 13/32 of an inch. So make the same pencil mark at the opposite side of the wood, 44.5 and 86.5, 1 3/4 inches and 3 13/32 of an inch. And join those lines up. Pop that to one side, and we're going to do the same again on each of the side pieces, and again from what is the top edge, so that's the flush edge. So pop that on its side, and we're only going to make the line inside these legs, so actually only on the side piece, so don't do it onto the legs there. So 44.5 and 86.5. That's 1 3/4 inches and 3 13/32. And do that on both side pieces. Okay, we're now going to attach the back piece to a side piece, and when we attach it, we're going to attach it so it sits at the front of that back leg, so along the sort of edge of the side piece. Can you see that there? So that there's a lip at the back on the leg. So apply glue along the long edge of the back piece. Making sure that the top of each piece is lined up. Then you can use a spare cocktail stick to remove the excess glue. And from around the back as well. I'm just going to let that dry off for a moment and then we'll attach the top, the bottom and the shelves. Okay, we're now going to attach the top piece, so apply glue to one long and one short edge. And sit the top piece at the top of the side piece, get that bit lined up first, so you've got a nice flush line along there, use your finger to make sure, and then supporting that, pull the back piece to meet it, and that then squares everything up. Just hold that together for a moment. Make sure it's pushed right into that top corner. And then once again, you can use your spare cocktail stick to get rid of that glue on the inside. Now we're going to attach our top shelf. Again, apply the glue to one long edge and one short edge. Always work from top to bottom when you're doing something like this, because then you're not sort of putting anything in your way. And this is going to sit just above that pencil line, so you can just see the pencil line below the edge of the shelf. Push it into place, making sure it's going right into that back corner. And the shelves are a bit shorter, just so that we've got a bit of clearance for the door frame, which we'll be attaching in there. Again, remove your excess glue. Remaining shelf. And you can fit extra shelves in if you wanted to. When I did my first design, I put 3 shelves inside, so one in the middle, one top and bottom, but it doesn't leave an awful lot of room there. And if you want to sort of put some, you know, miniatures in, maybe some old jugs and things like that, they're a lot taller than the 20mm that it would have sort of left. So that's why I designed it with just the 2 shelves. And again, if you wanted to put the shelves at different heights, you could do that. So you could perhaps have a narrower one and then 2 wider ones, depending on what you want to put in your cupboard. All the other measurements would stay the same. You just need to cut an extra shelf piece and then do your lines wherever you wanted them. And that's the beauty of making your own doll's house furniture, because you really can just do what you want to fit your display perfectly. finally the bottom piece. Okay, lining up the bottom first, make sure you've got a nice flush bottom edge, push it into that back corner, and then you can place it along the bottom edge of the back piece. Again, just use your thumb to make sure you've got a nice flush edge there, and then press it all together. Once again, I'm just going to let that dry off for a moment before we attach the remaining side. Okay, so now apply glue along all of these exposed edges. And then attach the side piece. So the top there is flush with the top that's in place. Make sure you've got a nice straight line there. And then you can line up the bottom edge as well. Use the lines on the side piece as well to make sure that your shelves are staying in the right position. Gently manoeuvre those if not. And then I've got some masking tape here. I'm going to put a piece straight over the side. Pull it nice and firmly. That. And then I'm going to lay it down like that, and I'm going to put a couple of pieces right over the front. Another sort of final check to make sure there's no gaps, and I actually want to just put a piece down that back. So notice there's a little hairline crack along that bottom piece and the back. And then again you can just pull that all nice and tight. I always say it, but you can never use enough masking tape or clamps or whatever you're using to hold things together. It's really important at the drying stage that it's all square, gap free, and that can then be left to dry, and we'll make a start on the doors. Once you've allowed enough time for the glue to dry, and this has been drying probably for about 45 minutes now, just take a small piece of sandpaper and just get in there and remove those pencil lines. There'll just be a tiny little bit of pencil line in front of the shelf. So just go in and sand that off. And then I've cut here the strips for the doors, and if you find that you've got any of those little sort of fluffy ends at the end of the strip, rather than sanding them off, just use a craft knife, nice sharp blade, and just snip along the end like that. And that way you're not taking away from the length and you're not rounding off any of the ends. So do that like that. And then we need to round one long edge of two of the vertical door strips, and because they're a bit longer, I've just taped a piece of sandpaper to my worktop here so that I can use both hands to sort of steer this along the paper. Let me just turn you around a little bit there. And then, so just hold it at a 45-degree angle, and it's quite difficult because it's just a thin piece, so you need to use your fingertips, and then just sweep it towards you, and as you do so bring it into an upright position. And you don't need to do too much, it's really just to round off that corner so that the door will open and close more smoothly. So do that on sort of both sides of that one long edge. And do that on the two pieces. And then I sand along sort of the front and back of each piece, because normally I end up digging my nails in, and in this soft wood it sort of makes a little mark, so just sand off any marks if you've made them. Okay, so bring your main unit back in, and we're going to drill the holes now for the pin hinges. So we're going to make a pencil mark 1.5mm or 1/16 of an inch from each side along this corner of the top piece and then the bottom piece. So make a little pencil mark, and I'm just doing it by eye, but if you're not very good at measuring by eye, then do get the ruler out and just measure that up and make a little pencil dot. Same on the other side, and then turn it over and do the same at the bottom. Like that. And then I've got a 0.75mm bit in here, and that's 1/32 of an inch. So drill carefully down into the wood. Don't push too hard or you might split the wood. So do that on each of the pencil marks. Like that. Okay, and then take a dressmaking pin. Bring in one of your rounded vertical strips and put it into position. So you don't want it sort of square up against that edge. There will just be a tiny little gap, so we've got a bit of room for opening and closing. And so I deducted a sort of millimetre from the joint width of the doors in the cut-in list there. So about 1/2 millimetre gap, like that. And then push the pin in through the hole and into the top of the strip. And we're just sort of making a little mark here to actually then drill a hole. So you don't want to push it all the way in, you're just making a little pinpoint. Turn it over and do the same thing at the other end. And then that's our mark for drilling our hole. And that way you'll get a lovely accurate fit when we come to fit the doors. So I'm just going to set up my vise. So I've just turned you around so you can see my desk vise here, and have that clamped there all of the time. And I put this piece of kitchen towel inside because when you're using softwood, the vise can tend to dent the wood. So just pop a piece of kitchen towel in there, and that will stop it from doing that. And then the other thing I've done as well is I've just written, where is it? Just faintly, so you might not be able to see it, but I've just written L and R for left and right on those sides so that I know which is which. And then I'll just pop that one in there. And then hold your drill upright, put it over the little mark that you made, the little hole, and then just slowly drill into the wood. Keep the drill upright, otherwise you'll find it'll sort of crack through the wood or split through the wood further down. And this drill bit did actually break off, but it's left a really nice length for drilling because that's all you need, about 1/4 inch. You just need to go down, so not the whole length of the drill bit, about 1/4 inch, 6mm. So drill each of the holes. Okay, so now take each of the strips and lay them into place and back against those shelves. And this is just to make a pencil mark for where we want the other horizontal strips to go. Just lay those in there. Like that. And then we want the strip so that the top of the strip is in line with the top of the shelf. And that way, when you've done your display, you're not going to be hiding anything with the strip. So make a little pencil mark on each of these vertical strips in line with the top of the shelf. So like that. And then when we come to attach our strips in between these two, the top of the strip will be, let's see if I can fit it in there now. So the top of the strip will be there. So everything on the shelf we'll be able to see. Okay, so do that on each of the strips. Make sure they're straight. But I'll lay it down to do it, that way I'll get a more accurate mark. Okay, so take those out of there. And then you can lay your strips roughly in place, remembering that these two in the middle go below that pencil line, and then there'll be the top and bottom flush with the top and bottom of the vertical strip. Same that side. Just checking that I'm actually all in camera there. Okay, and then you can glue them into place, so apply a little bit of glue to each end of each horizontal strip, and then lay that sort of roughly into place like that, and then start at the top, push that one against the vertical strips. You've got a nice flush edge along there, and then these sit just below your pencil mark like that, and then the bottom one again, nice flush edge along there, and then you can bring your remaining vertical strip into place, lining up the pencil marks, and again making sure you've got that nice flush edge at the top and bottom. So line each one up, press it together. That one's a little high. You've got time to manoeuvre before the glue begins to sort of take. So press it all together. And then don't pick that up, but just very carefully slide it along your work surface, and that can then be left to dry. So once you've allowed enough time for the doors to dry, gently sand off or erase the pencil marks, and now we're going to fit the doorknobs. So normally I would say measure the centre of this strip, but because we've got a smaller panel at the bottom here, if we put the handle in the centre it's going to look off. So we're going to sort of play a little trick on the eye, and we're going to do it in the centre of this centre section. So just make a little pencil mark that is the centre of these sort of two here. So mine's 36, that's going to be a little 18mm mark there, and then just turn that and do the centre that way as well. That's actually in the centre, and then the same on the other frame, so the centre of that sort of central gap. Didn't do it that time, so over a little bit there. And then I've got a 1.5mm bit in here, this little sort of handheld drill. So drill the hole. Like that. And then I also just like to jiggle it around a bit. That way the doorknob will go in easier. Just make sure that they're lined up, nothing's gone wrong there. No, that's fine. Hole there. Ooh! It all went flying off. Like that. And then just put a little bit of glue into the hole there. Don't need much because it will be quite a tight fit anyway. So just sort of drop a little bit in and then push the knob into place. You might need to jiggle it, but it's better that you've got a tighter fit. Press it down, making sure it's flat against the door frame. go and find that door that flew off. Okay, so the pieces are now ready to be painted, but before I do that, I just like to dry fit the doors, just to see if any adjustments are needed. So just pop those in where they'll go, line them up at the front, like that. That one as well. And they should just sort of fit easily side by side. If you find they're a bit tight, especially sort of along the middle, then you can just do some very gentle sanding. Don't sand off your rounded edge, because obviously the drill holes are in the correct places. So always sort of sand off in the centre, or at the top and bottom, and just do a little bit at a time. So don't go too mad, do a little bit, test them again, and then sand a little bit more if needed. But you don't want to sand too much off, so there shouldn't be too much of a gap down the centre. Okay, so I'm now going to apply the paint. Okay, so the unit in the doors has had 2 coats of paint and a gentle sand between each coat. And now we're going to apply the mesh to the doors. Before we do that, just dry fit your doors again, because once you've applied paint, you might find you need to do a little bit of sanding, which I did on mine. And then for the mesh, I'm using this medium grade mesh. This is available in my Etsy shop. I do a fine and a medium. I'm using the medium just because it's got the bigger holes, and we still want to be able to see into the cupboard. And you can cut this with normal scissors, but don't use your best scissors. I always keep a couple of pairs in my toolbox, and one that I just keep for cutting mesh and aluminium and things like that. Okay, so I've cut a piece of mesh for each door. So you want to cut it so it fits on the back, and you've got a bit of a border all the way around, like that. And then we're using super glue to apply it. I'm not a fan of super glue. I don't like using it. I don't like the smell, but we need to use it for this project. So I'm going to apply it straight to the door. It's got this sort of fine applicator tip. You just want a little bit just around the outside. And I've got a cocktail stick here on hand as well, just sort of spread that in. Don't go too close to the opening. And don't forget to put a piece across each of the struts as well. Like that. Pop the lid back on. Always be careful when you're using super glue. I've stuck my fingers together before and it's not nice. I'm just going to get a bit of card to wipe this excess on. So you really don't need much, and I've probably put a bit too much on that sort of first side. I think that's okay, and then you could just lay the mesh on. When you're pressing, press in the gaps rather than actually on the struts. Like that. And then I've got here a spare piece just of acetate, and I'm going to use that to press it down, because then your fingers aren't sort of coming into contact with it. So make sure it's touching all the way around, and the wire, because it's the medium grade, will sort of try and lift up. So you want to press it down all the way around, make sure it's touching everywhere. And then what I've got here is just a couple of pieces of 3mm sheet, and that's just because of the handle. We can't lay it flat on the desk. So I'm just going to lay that there like that, so that the sort of doorknob is hanging over the edge of that spare sheet. And then I'm going to weigh it down. Now, super glue doesn't take long to dry. Well, to take, should I say. It will take, I think it takes 24 hours to dry completely, but it will take quite quickly. So I'm going to weigh that down while it dries. And then I'll attach the mesh to the remaining door. Okay, so once the super glue has dried enough that you can handle them, it won't be dry fully for 24 hours, but this has been about 3 hours now, and I can touch that without getting it on my fingers. Take your sewing pin and just push through each of the holes, so in the unit and in the top of the doors, just to get rid of any sort of paint residue that might be in there, and then push a pin into each hole in the door, in both of the doors. And then take your pliers. I'm going to trim them to about 3mm or 1/8 of an inch, and I know that if I put my pliers at the top of the door there, that's about 3mm, but it depends on what pliers you've got. These have got sort of like an indentation before the cutter, so just check which ones you've got. Snip that off. I think my pliers are going a little bit blunt. Doing that to each of the pins. And then just very gently push each down on your work surface, just to make sure that they're all the way in. And then remove the bottom pin using your pliers, put that to one side, and then you can insert the top pin through the top hole in the unit, like that. And then position the door so it's nice and flush with the front edge, and then fingers crossed your bottom pin should just slide nicely in. Don't push it all the way in. Test that the door opens and closes nicely, and then you can push it all the way in. But once that pin's in, you can't get it out again. So if you pushed it in and found that the door perhaps did need a little bit more sanding or something, then it would be too late. So always just double check. And that's that one, and then you do exactly the same thing again on the other side. You might need to open the first door just so you can sort of get into it. Put it in position. I'm probably jinxing it by saying it, but you never find that two doors go smoothly. So normally you can't find the hole in the second one or something. But let's see what happens. Oh no, that's okay. So check that it opens, and then push the pin all the way in, like that. Okay, take the food store top piece, and we're going to bevel one long edge and both short edges. So have a piece of medium grade sandpaper on your worktop, hold the piece against it at a 45-degree angle and just sweep it towards you. You can see there, that's just starting to bevel off, but you want to make that into a nice sharp bevel, like that, and then you can do the same at each side, like that. Now if you want the unit top to be the same colour as your cupboard, you can attach that now so that the back is flush with the back of the legs and that you've got an even overhang at either side, and then you can paint that in situ. But I'm going to have mine in dark oak and I'm going to use wood dye to colour it, so I'll do that first and then attach. And just a little tip for when you're colouring pieces like this, you can make yourself a little masking tape handle. I'll just cut a piece off here. So attach it to the underside of the piece, make a little loop like that, and then just attach another little bit at either end to hold it in place. Otherwise you'll find it sort of unstick as you're working on it. And then you've got a little handle there that you can hold as you're painting it or colouring it. And then you've got a little sort of tab as well that you can prop it up with to dry. So I'm going to do that now and then we'll attach it to the unit. So I've used wood dye on my top piece in a dark oak, and then I've secured that with masking tape and clamps. I'll now leave that to dry and then just apply a final coat of wax. And there is the completed piece. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please do give it a thumbs up, that would be appreciated. And if you have a go at making this, do come over to my Facebook group, Little Bits and Pieces by You, and show me how you get on. I think it's a really lovely piece of furniture, and I'd love to see how you display it inside. Lots of room in there, you can fit lots of lovely miniatures in there. And if you enjoy making your own doll's house furniture and miniatures, you might like to have a look at my books. I've published 4 of them so far. They're all available to purchase from Amazon, and I'll pop a couple of links below. And for now, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.